We're in Washington, D.C. with Sarah Stern, the founder and executive director of Emet.
Yes, the Endowment for Middle East Truth.
Where does Emet fit in the mix relative to AIPAC, whose conference just finished here, and they're known as the Israel Lobby?
Okay, AIPAC is, they try very, very hard to walk down the center road. And they can't, and you can't please everyone. As my good friend Yoram Ettinger, Ambassador Yoram Ettinger has said to me, in Texas there is a saying that the only thing that walks right down the center of the road is an armadillo, and an armadillo usually gets run over. Sometimes you have to take a principled stance.
Well, does AIPAC take principled stance?
Yes, they do. They do. However, we differ from AIPAC in that we feel that the Land for Peace formula has been a complete disaster. We see the thousands of Israelis that have been murdered since Oslo in 1993, including 66 Americans. And we see that, it has emboldened the people that hate us the most. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing how the incitement has continued. Mm-hmm. Israel has actually sold a valuable commodity of land in exchange for empty promises that are being recycled each time they get back to the negotiating table. Mm-hmm. So, it's empirically proven that this paradigm does not work, and sometimes it's important to go back to the drawing board and to reevaluate the premises of your paradigm.
And where does AIPAC fall on that spectrum?
AIPAC is trying very, very hard to preserve the peace process. Emet believes that we should stop aiding the Palestinian Authority now. Mm-hmm. We've actually felt since 93, when the day after signing the Oslo Accords, that Arafat went on television in Tunis and said this is a Jordanian television station, mm-hmm. and he said this is the peace of the brave, akin to what the Prophet Muhammad mm-hmm. had signed with the tribe of Quraysh, and he made them vulnerable and then eviscerated them. Mm-hmm. And the problem is now there have been 23 years where the Palestinian Authority has used every means possible mm-hmm. to indoctrinate their people to hate and to kill Israelis. And now we're mm-hmm. seeing this disgusting intifada of the knife and the rifle and the automobile. And it's tragic because mm-hmm. we tried to stop this. Mm-hmm. I mean, I tried as an individual way before there was an Emet. Emet mm-hmm. is now 11 years old mm-hmm. because we know, as John F. Kennedy said, peace just doesn't exist in signed documents and treaties alone, mm-hmm. but in the hearts and minds of the people. And these people's brains have been marinated towards hating the Israeli and the Jew.
Which peoples?
The Palestinian peoples.
How about in other parts of the Middle East surrounding areas?
Well, the other parts of the Middle East surrounding areas, it's not that different. Even though Israel has a peace treaty with Jordan, the Jordanian books are extraordinarily anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. And Israel does so much in terms of agriculture and teaching the Jordanians about how to conserve water and best use water. And we don't see that. I do think that Ahmed al-Sisi from Egypt is being really heroic and has been a wonderful, wonderful partner to Israel. But we differed from AIPAC when Mohammed Morsi was in power from the Muslim Brotherhood, because AIPAC did not want to separate the aid package from Israel from that of Egypt, Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority. Mm-hmm. So there are some real critical differences. We felt that we have to evaluate who's in power mm-hmm. and whether or not they really were going to continue any sort of alliance with the Jewish state.
What does your group do on Capitol Hill?
Well, aside from our monthly seminars, we are on the Hill right now. In fact, I'm so sorry that Adam Turner, who's our wonderful legislative director here, is not here, but he is on the Hill right now. We are on the Hill every day. Right now, we are educating Democratic members of the Senate and the House as to the violations of the JCPOA.
Which is with the Iran
the Iran nuclear deal.
nuclear deal.
Which, by the way, the Iranian nuclear deal is really not one deal because the American version of the deal or the international version of the deal is 159 pages long. The deal that the Majlis, the Iranian parliament, voted on in Farsi is over 1,000 pages long. And what they agreed to and told their people is something totally different. From, yes, and the deal in itself is bad enough. Where there are people like Qasem Salami, who is the director of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, has been taking this deal as an exit pass, where missile tests have been conducted in the last several weeks, and those last two missiles said Israel should be wiped off the face of the earth. Now, unfortunately, the Obama administration has become the attorneys for the Islamic Republic of Iran, and they said, well, technically they're not really violating the deal. We're concerned. We don't like this, but they are violating United Nations Security Council resolution. I mean, I feel that this deal is going to go down in history as the worst international piece of diplomacy ever. It makes the deal that Neville Chamberlain made at Munich look like it was hardcore.
What do you see on Capitol Hill that you wish the general public ought to be aware of in terms of counter-lobbying to Israel's interests?
Well, first of all, I don't think people in the Jewish community are aware that CAIR, the Council of American Islamic Relations, has been following AIPAC's lead. And they have a summer program, and they have an all-year internship program where they place their people in congressional offices. I think it's really important that you realize this, that we in the Jewish community have been asleep at the wheel of history, while the Muslim American community has been taking notes and has been borrowing from our lead. In fact, 20 years ago, I saw some people from the Muslim Brotherhood at AIPAC. Now, I think it's extraordinarily important that we understand that, nature abhors a vacuum. And if we don't fill it with our young advocates that have to be there, 365 days a year, not just when the AIPAC Policy Conference occurs once a year, that, this vacuum is going to be filled up by the other side.
Is there something inherently troublesome about having Muslim interests lobbying on Capitol Hill?
Yes. I mean, if you were to read CAIR's website or the website of ISNA, the Islamic Society of North America, or any others, I think that you would realize that their motives, values, and objectives are totally inimical to what it is that the pro-Israel community wants. And it's very scary to think that you might be calling your member of Congress and a CAIR intern might be screening out the call.
What might that play out like?
Well, if, for example, there's a very important issue, like the plans of the French to take the issue of Palestinian statehood to the Security Council, which we are not sure the Obama administration will veto. If there's an important issue like the Iranian nuclear deal, and you call any member of Congress, it is actually that these people are the bouncers. These people are the filter through
the doormen.
The doormen. through
gatekeepers?
the gatekeepers through which your message is getting through.
Uh-huh. How would having Muslim American staffers in these places be different than having Jewish American staffers?
Well, we know that CARE is an extraordinarily smooth and slick operation, and they make themselves into a Muslim anti-defamation league. But we have never seen an act of terrorism that CARE has condemned, whether in Israel or around the globe. Their big thing is Islamophobia. And the Muslims are waging war with Western civilization. And if they're going to whitewash what's going on, and you have staffers that are very stealthily getting into different offices, different levels of our government. When the Muslims or radical Islam is declaring war on Western civilization, it is like having spies within our structure, our government structure.
Aside from Jonathan Pollard, do you believe that there are Jewish spies for Israel within the administration or our government? I mean, Jonathan, who's been released after 35 years.
Yes, no, I don't believe
Do you believe
any
that?
such thing. I don't believe any such thing. I mean, I think every American Zionist that I know, every Zionist that I know, wants a strong and secure United States of America, and our interests are totally the same.
Aligned.
Yes, aligned.
Jewish, do Jews put American allegiance first?
Do Jews put American allegiance first? I think so. And certainly, you know, if they're working at a place like the FBI or a place where there's intelligence, they swear an oath to this country, and I think that they mean it. I think there's a real difference between Judaism and Christianity and Islam, because Islam has the concept of taqiyya, to say exactly what it is that people want to hear, and to whitewash Islam. So I don't believe that Jews have ever posed a threat to this country. It's not as though that we have Jews, you know, bombing the World Trade Center, or Jews taking down daycare and welfare centers in San Bernardino, or going into Brussels or Paris. I mean, we are on the same side of this fight, and I think, you know, it's about time that our government understands and appreciates that, and don't give Jewish employees undue scrutiny.
But Islam and the Islamic movements are different?
Absolutely. I mean, if you read the Quran, and I hope everyone has, you see that Islam is a supremacist religion. Israel wants to establish a caliphate, an Islamic caliphate.
Israel wants to?
Islam.
Sorry.
No, Israel doesn't want to.
Yeah,
Islam wants to
I
establish.
misheard that, okay.
Yeah, Islam wants to establish an Islamic caliphate and dominate the world. And that is why many naive liberal Jews who go to these interfaith workshops sponsored by CARE are being duped. They're just being duped. You know, if you go back to when there was a raid on an apartment in Philadelphia, this was way back in 2001, you could see that there was a memo of how the Muslim world is going to incrementally and very stealthily insert themselves into various aspects of the American social scene, communities, and government. And wave the triumphant flag of Islam eventually.
Because Islam is inherently political?
Islam is inherently political. I would not argue that Islam is not a religion like some of my friends do, but political ideology. I think they're totally intermeshed. I think they really do believe in God. They're faithful Muslims. The problem is, it's very, very difficult to be able to distinguish, like the real religious Muslims, when their prophet has told you that you have got to conquer the world and that Islam is the one, then how does one really know? How does one really know? This is a big, big dilemma. I know there are plenty of wonderful Muslims that don't want to eat pork, they don't want to drink, they don't want to gamble. That's fine, and they want to live quiet lives. But many of them put their heads down when their imams are, and therefore giving silent assent to when their imams are telling them that someday the world will be all Islamic.
Is the issue at hand exclusively Israel?
No. Israel is in a unique position because of where it sits geographically. Israel is on the front lines of defending and protecting Western civilization from this movement of radical Islam that is trying very, very hard to conquer the world. So, support for Israel is not a gift. First of all, Israel, I think, is doing all of us a favor by protecting and preserving Western democracy and Western democratic values, and they're our eyes and ears.
They are.
Yes, Israel is our eyes and ears in the Middle East. Israel would love nothing better than to share intelligence with the United States. It's the one trusted.
Well, don't they?
They do, and it's the one trusted ally. It's the only ally that consistently votes with the United States and the United Nations. It's the only one. And President Lyndon Johnson said that Israel is much better than the most sophisticated aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean. We are, in Israel, the Jewish state is a eastern outpost of Western democratic values.
How do you sustain your endeavors?
We write and publish and get our name out there. We've written in many, many periodicals and journals and books, and we hold seminars. And so people are beginning to hear about us. We have to apply for grants. We have to meet with donors.
Do you run on donations?
Yes, we started because my father was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful guy who died in 1979, and he made $10,000 a year. And my mother was a wonderful woman who was a Zionist, and she sold our house in White Plains, New York, lived like a pauper, and invested her money very conservatively in the stock market. And by the time she had died, about 15 years later, she had left a sum of $100,000 to each of her 4 children. And after I had been to a discussion at one of these think tanks that was really, really outrageous, I ended up going back to my office. Then I was the Director of Government and Legislative Affairs for the American Jewish Congress. And I called my husband and I said, that money that Mom lent us, she was such a great Zionist. I know you wanted to use this as our retirement savings, but I'd really like to use this to start a think tank which is unabashedly pro-Israel on our side of the issues and gets the truth out, and I want to call it Emet. And my wonderful husband said, your mom would have been very proud if you used the money this way. Go ahead.
But now you've been running this for a long time.
11 years.
Do you have a staff?
Yes, I do. We have a wonderful staff. Adam Turner is actually on Capitol Hill, trying to meet with the Democratic senator staff, trying to convince her that she should have some buyer's remorse about voting for the Iran deal. We have Jennifer Deckel, who's our director of research and governmental research and communications. And we have.
Is that her there?
This is.
Can she turn around? Okay.
This is Jennifer, and we have Deanne Heffernan. Deanne, who is our assistant director of communications and research. So we have a very, very small, overworked and underpaid, fabulous staff that I.
Are they fabulously overworked?
They are fabulously overworked and fabulously underpaid, and they are all wonderful people, and I love them like my own children. We need to expand because we are always doing so many things simultaneously, and so we definitely could use some support.
And do you have to be Jewish to donate?
No. We have non-Jewish members of our board. The only thing you have to be is a Zionist.
Zionistic?
Zionistic.
Could be a Zionistic Christian.
Could be a Zionistic Christian.
How about a Zionistic atheist?
A Zionistic atheist. It doesn't matter. Anybody can. But we really are trying to tell the emet the truth. And this is something that some of the other organizations want to whitewash or wash over. And we feel that, it was a good Jewish boy named Jesus Christ that said, "The truth shall set you free." So we feel that, and Socrates said, "If you know the good, you'll follow it." So we feel that Israel has always been on the morally right side of the issue. And if people were just aware of this unbelievable contribution that this tiny little beleaguered Jewish state has made in the last 66 years, almost 67 years of its existence. 66, 67, 68 years. It would, people would understand and appreciate what a gift the Jews are bringing to Western civilization by going back to their ancient historic homeland and through the rebirth of the modern Jewish state. And I often wonder if there were no wars, and Israel has accomplished so much up until now, but if there were no wars, could you imagine what Israel would be capable of accomplishing?
Well, the pacifist ideal is jeopardizing Israel now.
That's right. No, it is not. It's not Israel's fault that there are no wars. Colonel Richard Kemp says every single war that Israel's fought has been a defensive war. And when you're talking about a little sliver of land that is surrounded from without and within by people that want to extinguish it, they have got to always be on their guard. They cannot close their eyes for 1 minute.